Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when
Chase
you're
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got him.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
All right. Welcome back to Operation Domination. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader, joined here with Adam LaRue. And as you can see, if you're watching on the podcast or watching on the video side at Fantasy Football Advice Network at FF Advice Net, we have Brian Scott, the one and only Dr. Brian Scott of the Injured List podcast, live from Indy at the Combine. What's going on, Bri guy?
Hey guys, nice to see you. Well, I can't actually see you, but nice to hear you.
As long as you can hear us, that's all that matters. We can see you. We can see there's some action happening in the background.
Oh yeah.
What's been going on so far since you got there?
Oh man, it's been nonstop. It's been awesome, by the way. This is my second year attending, but I'm actually on a media credentials this year, working with Blonde Blitz podcast with Deb Wickus from that Sports Podcast Network. So we're getting things done, filming a lot of content, interviewing a lot of players, speaking with people, making connections, networking. It's been awesome.
That's fantastic. It's always exciting when we finally get on the inside. You deserve it, Brian. You deserve it. So if you can't tell, we have the doctor on, so we're going to be talking about medical players, and then we'll get into Brian and some other things that maybe he's experiencing at the Combine.
Yep.
Adam, I'm going to let you take it away on our first player. If you have the list there in front of you, we got a quarterback from Penn State we want to talk about.
Yeah, Drew Allar.
Yeah, so Drew Allar came up in a lot of conversations coming into the Combine here. He's coming off a broken ankle that was surgically fixed back in October of 2025. Now, he's still an invitee, but the medical and the rehab part of the eval, that's going to be huge for him at this year's Combine. It was his left ankle, and as the most recent reports, he should be ready for camp. Apparently, however, many feel as though he could slip down to the third round, and this will drop his stock significantly, and it's all related to the surgically repaired ankle. Now, we're not certain how much he's going to be doing here this weekend in quarterback drills, but he will be in attendance. Just to give you a little bit of information about ankle fractures, it's the highest incidence in males between ages 15 to 24. An isolated malleolus fracture, which means either the inner or outer part of the ankle, is usually about 70% of these ankles. Those usually are not that bad, believe it or not, and most guys will make a pretty full recovery. But bimalleolar ankle fractures, which take on a whole other animal as far as severity and long-lasting impact, those make up about 20% of ankle injuries we see. And the outcomes are purely dependent on surgical fixation and anatomic reduction of the ankle. So that's really critical when we're talking about returning to play and functional activity. Now, 90% of these ankles will develop no pain with minimal limitations at about a year after recovery. Overall success rate, though, is about 90%. So most guys, 90% will get back to doing their normal thing, outcomes unaffected, ability unaffected. Sometimes that prolonged recovery, though, if it does become one of those, could take up to 2 years before you see that full return to full return to success and activity. So just a little tidbit there about ankle fractures in general.
Yeah, so I did see a report that he is expected to actually throw at the Combine. Okay. Maybe he's pushing it a little bit, but there's a reason for that. Adam, we talked about this in a couple episodes past. So Allar is dealing with the fact that he had a disappointing season because he got injured, regressed when he did play earlier in the year, but he has the opportunity of the fact that there's no other quarterbacks outside of Mendoza that have a chokehold over number 2. So what's your rundown here, taking the information that Brian just gave us and your rundown specifically about Drew Allar?
Yeah, I think he's someone who both knows that he's got a lot of room to make up, but also knows that there's room ahead of him to move up. To your point, Brian, I think third round is probably about where I would peg him right now. But he's someone who I was very high on last offseason, is someone who could potentially push for a late first round pick type of quarterback if he had come out then. And had seemed to show some progress throwing down the field a bit more, being a little bit more aggressive versus this season. Kind of, you mentioned it, even before the injury, it seemed like he was a little bit conservative, throwing a lot of screens, and has had a big time game issue through a lot of his collegiate career. So definitely some like big question marks with him. But has the physical tools and is someone who I think is interesting if he meets well at the combine, if teams can fall for the intangibles, and if he throws well.
Yeah, he's going to throw. I doubt he's going to run, but running was a part of his game, and not so significantly so he's a dual threat, but enough that he had 419 yards on the ground in 2024, and then 321 of those yards coming off of scrambles. So this guy is healthy. He's somebody who can move to add that extra fantasy value. So it's a good thing from what Brian is saying that 90% have a full recovery rate. So that could be working well for him if he can perform at the combine. When we go to the next quarterback, the other one he's competing with to be the number 2 quarterback overall, Ty Simpson was coming in with some medical questions. Brian, what do you got on Ty Simpson?
Yeah, so Ty Simpson, Alabama, reportedly fractured a rib in the college football playoffs back in January, which is likely healed by now. But it's this recent injury and plus some history of injuries over the last season that kind of raise a red flag and are going to be thoroughly examined here at the combine. For one, he played through multiple injuries in the latter half of the season, including a lower back issue, some gastritis, which is a stomach irritation, inflammation of the stomach, and elbow bursitis. Now, he's eager to prove himself here and is expected to be a full participant. Long term, none of these injuries should carry much weight.
Well, the elbow especially, because we're already dealing with a quarterback that a lot of us have questions on as far as arm talent goes. But Adam, why don't you take it away here on what you're looking at with Ty Simpson?
I think he's one who the medical is going to be a really big deal for, not necessarily in the sense of what it means durability-wise, but how do you contextualize the latter half of his season last season? Because around like October, he was very much so in some people's heads ahead of Mendoza, and very much so like in that conversation, early first-round pick, guy that was a franchise quarterback in a lot of people's minds. And it was late October into November playoffs, that whole stretch where he fell down boards and is now like not even safely the second quarterback in the class. I think he is on most people's boards. It's probably consensus, but I don't think it's a safe position for him, to say the least. So I think it's one where if teams are able to contextualize that, it was due to injury that he slid down a little bit, and that first portion of the season version of Ty Simpson is the real Ty Simpson, he's someone who could benefit quite a bit.
I just find him he's conflicting when it comes to the metric level of it, because on one hand, you have a quarterback who clearly needs to play within the structure of the system, get the ball out quickly, play it safe, which typically he actually did. But on the other hand, this is also a guy that had like a 2.94 average time to throw, which is incredibly high, and an 18.8 pressure to sack ratio, which is also high. Not quite the 20%, but close enough to where we have to sit there and look, especially for a quarterback of his makeup, why is that? Because those two things seem to conflict with one another. Plus, we have questions about the arm strength. Plus, we have questions about how good of an athlete he is. I'm sorry, when I look at Ty Simpson, I see a backup. I see a guy who should not go higher than the 3rd round, and somebody who, frankly, as long as Drew Allar doesn't crap the bed, I'm going to have ranked behind, because I just think Drew Allar has higher upside when it comes down to it with the attributes that he has. I don't think Ty Simpson is enough of a processor, an accurate enough quarterback that he should leapfrog in front of Drew Allar's physical talents that you could potentially mold. We have more quarterbacks, though, to talk about. So we have Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. Brian, what's the update there?
Yeah, and Dan, just so you know, and I don't know if it matters, I can't hear Adam on my end, so if there's any questions, just let me know. But as far as Garrett Nussmeier is concerned, multiple outlets have referenced him battling numerous issues that severely impacted his performance this past season. So teams here in Indy are going to definitely want to clarify what these issues were. And in particular, there's been quite a stir regarding this oblique injury that he was dealing with and was originally diagnosed with last year while at LSU by the LSU medical staff. Now, for starters, he himself has made some conflicting statements regarding this quote-unquote misdiagnosis by the LSU medical staff. And he's not shared specifics, however, about what that discrepancy was. Now, according to new reports, he has been working with a new team of doctors and has said that he's working his way through the injury. Apparently, surgery was discussed as an option with his new team, but it appears that it won't be necessary. He sat himself down and got healthy for the Senior Bowl, which is good news. And by all according reports to that, he balled out and threw the ball pretty well. But teams are definitely going to do their due diligence here during the physical exam portion of the combine.
Another guy who struggled this past year. Another guy who was in top 5 conversation originally. And now we're talking about, well, is he going to be a late day 2 or maybe even a day 3 pick?
Dan, if I had to guess, I think he was dealing with some type of sports hernia that may have been minor and that they're probably keep an eye on. But keep in mind, if that's the case, this could come back to bite him down the road.
Yeah, because again, you kind of let it linger. You didn't get to address it in any kind of capacity. So, Adam, with all that in mind, where's your evaluation on Garrett Nussmeier this early in the process?
I think very similarly to how you view Ty Simpson, just someone who doesn't have a lot of physical upside. Seems like a pretty smart quarterback, but I think you saw some of the chaos of the team around him come into the fruition a little bit last season, right? Like, the turnover-worthy play rate wasn't horrible, but it was worse than it was the season prior. Pressure to sack ratio is above average, but nothing special. Below average yards per attempt. He's just someone who is a very conservative quarterback and had some times where even that wasn't necessarily going particularly well this past season, but you definitely saw how it can be successful the season prior. He's not someone who, especially from our dynasty perspectives, I'm super excited about. But I think someone who, as a backup could definitely run a competent offense. Like, I wouldn't be worried about him coming in if my quarterback was injured and he was coming in. I would still, be able to play receivers and stuff.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I do think he's actually a high quality backup type of quarterback. Not someone we're talking about who's definitely not an NFL prospect. I believe he is. It was just 2 topsy-turvy type of years. Like you mentioned, like 2024, you're talking about 4,000 plus yards and a 9.5 ADOT, and then turn the clock to 2025, and then we're talking about a 7-yard ADOT, and a guy who became a check down quarterback with a chaotic offense around him and perhaps an injury, like to Brian's point, that was misdiagnosed in the first place. And maybe that has something to do with it. So there's a lot here to unpack with a Garrett Nussmeier. But at the same time, I feel like we're going to spend time talking a lot about this quarterback class in a higher percentage way than what their impact is necessarily going to be in the NFL, especially for fantasy football, with where I think they're going to go. And that includes this next guy in Carson Beck. So what do we got here, Brian?
So the big issue with him goes back to 2024, actually, in dealing with an elbow injury that turned out to be a UCL tear, the ulnar collateral ligament, which is injury we hear a lot about in baseball, not so much in football, to be honest with you. But the background medical that teams are still going to account for during this combine definitely has to do with this elbow. It was surgically treated prior to the 2025 season in his transfer to Georgia. He had the UCL repaired using a very common technique nowadays, using an internal brace device, which is something we commonly see in ankle surgery as well, where it's basically a backstop to the ligament repair and bolsters the repair, thus making it even more stronger sometimes than when it was prior to the injury. So again, this being an uncommon football injury, most guys don't have any major issues coming back from this. His seemed to be a traumatic injury when he went to make a throw and his elbow got suddenly bent backwards after hitting a helmet of an opposing player. So, when you're talking about throwing mechanics, though, the football throw is slightly different than the baseball throw, so much so, though, that it actually doesn't put a tremendous amount of stress on the UCL. So I don't think this injury is going to affect his draft prospects very much at all, to be honest with you. But they will do a thorough background check and research into this with him here at the Combine.
It sounds very similar to Brock Purdy to me, especially as a 49ers fan, is what he had to go
He
through.
was one of the few guys that actually played quarterback position that had it repaired.
Yeah, so there you go. So obviously is an example of an injury that we don't expect to be a reason Carson Beck gets hindered. However, I'm curious, Adam, what your evaluation of Carson Beck is as a prospect to begin with.
Yeah, he's someone who I've vocally not loved over the time we've had with him. Someone who was early on in the cycle last season, someone who we were talking about as potentially coming out last season, then ultimately transferred to Miami. Miami, of course, had a very successful season, I think we would say, and I think he showed some flashes, but I think part of showing flashes just kind of reinforced that Carson Beck is who we talked about last season, and that there are going to be flashes, but there are also going to be a lot of silly moments. And I think when you look back at it, like, while it feels like you watch him, that you get some big time throws here and there. He is a 44th percentile big time throw rate player. He's not someone who's big game hunting necessarily. There's some good throws in there on tape for sure, but it's not particularly special. And he combines that with being someone who, is a 55th percentile pressure to sack ratio guy, someone who isn't navigating the pocket especially well. I think he has some tools that are interesting from an NFL perspective, but he's been in college a long time, so it makes it hard for me to believe that much more is coming out of him this stage.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So you've been in college for a long time. It's not like Miami was the first good team that he was on. I mean, he was on Georgia before. And so when I look at 2024 and 2025, yes, there was marked improvement as far as adjusted accuracy is concerned, time to throw, avoidance of the sack. Those things all very much improved, but yet he still wasn't very aggressive, even though he was on a better team. He's basically just a game manager. And that's all he had to be in Georgia, too, by the way. But yet we saw a much worse version of him. So is a Carson Beck becoming a man amongst boys and just becoming a better managing quarterback in the collegiate atmosphere? It doesn't really project well any way you break it down of Carson Beck really truly being an NFL starter and on your fantasy football radar. He is somebody, to your point, he does flash the ability to make the throws that you expect to see an NFL prospect make, but ultimately there's just nothing consistent and nothing about his game that seems to elevate his teammates around him. He's not going to be the reason he propels his team to win, and that's at the collegiate level. So that makes me scary about what that means as far as the NFL level is concerned. So we're going to move off of quarterbacks. We're going to head into the running back room, of which there is two major ones. And the first one is somebody that we have, and I swear we're not doing this on purpose and Operation Domination, but we've literally talked about this guy like every single week so far that we've done the prospects, and it just keeps happening. But take it away, Brian, on Nicholas Singleton.
Yeah, so Nick Singleton, he broke his foot at the Senior Bowl, had surgery about a week later, so he won't participate in any combine drills or on-field work, but he will be here probably getting his medicals done and doing interviews. Now, his father is on record reporting to Rich Scarcella of the Reading Eagle that he fractured the fifth metatarsal bone in his foot during practice for the Senior Bowl. I can only imagine that it was probably a Jones fracture, which is one that we typically will fix relatively quickly in athletes. And the reason for that is because these particular fractures of that bone have about a 15 to 30% increased risk of what we call non-union, meaning it won't heal unless you surgically fix it. And rather than wait 6 weeks, sometimes it's best to just go in, put a little bone graft in there, and then do what we call an intramedullary screw and compress the fracture site, thus guaranteeing that it heals. Now, 90% of those fractures are typically a different area of the bone in a different zone where you don't have to worry about that. So the fact that he had surgery so quickly tells me that that's probably what he had done. He probably had a Jones fracture that was fixed. Now, with that fixation, you're generally looking at a period of non-weight bearing for anywhere between 3 weeks or so, sometimes 4. Then followed by protected weight bearing and therapy focusing on range of motion. Usually running and impact activities can resume at 6 weeks as long as they're pain-free and x-rays show good healing. So he won't be down for long, but it definitely may affect his combine evaluation, and it may cause teams to shy away based on the fact that they don't know if this thing is healed yet because enough time hasn't passed.
Yeah, so, and this is somebody that we talked about, Adam. Like, he rests on his athleticism. That's who he is. If he's going to have any chance to be an NFL prospect. So taking in consideration of this injury, taking consideration of what we've talked about Nicholas Singleton already, what's your prognosis? What do you think he's going to go drafted as?
I think not being able to perform at the combine is really tough for him. I brought him up when we talked about guys who really could have used the combine, and it was funny. I made the mistake not realizing that he wasn't able to perform because I wasn't sure based on the injury yet. I had watched on NFL Stock Exchange that they made the exact same error there. So good minds think alike and whatnot. But at any rate, it's someone who's definitely relying on his athleticism for his draft stock, just the size, weight, speed combination that he is. I think he's a solid wide receiver, but someone who's got a lot to learn as a runner. I think the physical ability is definitely there, and that's kind of what you would potentially get excited about, but not having, going to the combine, putting up the monster RAS and being someone who, is winning this event. not having that, I think, is not great for his stock, because it would have kept him at the top of people's minds. And I just think it's not a great look for him to just kind of fade to the background right now.
Yeah, somebody who definitely needed the combine in order to shine. And I'm going to go on a limb here. Brian, you can back me up. I'm going to assume he's not going to be able to perform at a pro day either.
It depends on the timing, to be honest with you, and I'm not sure when those dates are lined up. Obviously, it's going to be before the draft, so it's going to be close. It's going to be very close. If he's not at least at 6 weeks, then I wouldn't expect him doing much.
So, yeah, I don't know what Penn State's pro day is off the top of my head. If it's late March, though, if you're given 6 weeks, there's an opportunity that maybe he could try to be out there. He's somebody who needs to show off his athleticism, because the tape shows a lot of inconsistencies in his vision and his ability to, frankly, break tackles for a guy who has his kind of athleticism and has his size to begin with. So that's kind of the downfall there a little bit when it comes to Nicholas Singleton. Only 3 runs of 15-plus yards, so not what you want to see out of a guy with his type of profile. Okay, so we got Le'Veon Moss, and this is somebody who was a big name coming into the season, and an injury really affected him. So what do you got, Brian?
Yeah, so he's got some major medical concerns coming into the combine this year. After a knee injury ended his 2025 season, he was on the productive pace with quite a bit of yards and limited action before the injury, making his medical checkup at this combine critical for his day 2 draft hopes. So, he missed significant time in 2024 with the knee injury as well, and then again in 2025 with an ankle. So durability is definitely questionable entering the league. The combine physical will be an important part of his draft prospects. Now, there's not much as far as specifics with him, but I do anticipate that he will be performing on-field drills and doing stuff here at the combine. I haven't heard any reports to suggest otherwise.
I mean, it's good news he's going to be on the field, because he's going to have to show that he's healthy and still athletic. Because, Adam, I'll kick this over to you, but Le'Veon Moss is somebody who was already kind of limited as far as his range as a running back. So what's your take on Le'Veon Moss here?
Yeah, he definitely has something to prove if he's able to do so. Because, look, it's harsh. I currently have him, of the running backs that I've watched and graded so far, as the worst pass blocker of this class so far.
I think that's fair.
So it kind of hurts the receiving game quite a bit. So I need to trust that you were a strong runner, to be honest with you, for you to be successful and relevant from a fantasy perspective, especially. So someone who you got to feel really good about the running ability. And health is a big part of that, because ultimately I have him 40th percentile in attempts of NFL prospects over the last 2 seasons, which, if anything, is a little bit higher than I would have expected, just given how unavailable he's been.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and you're talking about a guy who can be efficient, does show decent vision, does show decent contact balance. All of that kind of pops up on tape, and it shows in his rushing production and his ability to finish, because he does have a good track record of being able to finish inside of the red zone. But to your point about the pass protection being a problem to question, he wasn't really all that productive as a receiver to begin with, period. So this is definitely a running back who comes into the NFL, even if he's healthy, who very easily will be pigeonholed into an early down role, and frankly will likely be a day 3 pick in my mind. So if you're a day 3 pick, you're not a crazy athlete, and you don't give much in the receiving game, that typically does not have a great track record for fantasy football production down the road in dynasty. So we'll have to see how Le'Veon Moss shakes out. We have a huge name to talk about, somebody who expects to go in the top 10 of the NFL draft, and that's a wide receiver in Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State. Brian, what's going on with him?
Yeah, so he brings with him major durability, injury history problems. He's been a major talking point in draft coverage. Combine medicals are going to be a key swing variable for his draft stock. And now he has a significant college injury history, including a major knee injury back while he was at Colorado in 2022, where he had an ACL, MCL, PCL sprain/tear that cost him the entire 2023 season, followed by a clavicle injury back in Arizona State in late 2024, and a hamstring injury in 2025 that sidelined him temporarily as well. So this has raised concerns for his NFL prospects despite his enormous talent. He will not be doing any on-field drills or testing at the combine because of that hamstring injury. However, I don't know if that's really important, because he's got enough film on him that teams are still pretty high on him from what I've heard. However, buyer beware. I've featured many wide receivers and other skill position players in years past on my episode that looked at the combine and the NFL draft. And if you look at these athletes, historically speaking, with injury histories, that typically does carry over to the NFL.
Not a great sign. And you mentioned it. He's got great film. Adam, knowing all of this, how does that affect your Jordan Tyson ranking?
It just makes it tough to put him as the one. I think he's still very clearly in that first tier. I think he's still very clearly, when you stack him up against the draft class as a whole, someone who deserves to be a first rounder, and even in the first half of that. But when you compare him specifically to Carnell Tate, and depending on the landing spot, to Mekhi Lemon as well, it makes it a little bit more tough to necessarily gravitate towards Tyson relative to those two. But still, I think head and shoulders above like that next tier, for example.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that part. He's in the number one tier. And I think the number one tier includes three receivers. It includes Tyson, includes Carnell Tate, and it includes Mekhi Lemon, like you mentioned. Tyson, when I just watched the film, Tyson's my number one based on the fact that the guy just gets open. I mean, we're talking about 2.37 yards per route run. We're talking about an 89 PFF grade against man coverage. Talking about a guy who doesn't drop the football. I mean, he is your prototypical high floor wide receiver. I can stick him on the outside. I'm going to trust you to move the chains. I'm going to trust you to make a big play. I'm going to trust you to be the safety blanket for my wide receiver. And I think he has the highest floor when you watch the tape of all the wide receivers in this draft class. But when you factor in the injury history and the fact that Carnell Tate and Mekhi Lemon, what they bring to the table is not very far off from a guy like a Jordan Tyson, who are much safer as far as the injury aspect of it goes, I think it is enough for me to move Carnell Tate to my number one. I'm still debating if it's going to cost him my number two spot and move Mekhi Lemon in there too, but I am with you. He is definitely still in the top tier regardless of these injuries, at least heading into the NFL draft. Okay, last but certainly not least, we had Chris Bell, who, man, he was looking pretty good until he had a bad injury. So, Brian, what do you got?
So, yeah, he tore his ACL in November, unfortunately, had to have surgery. So, the health and recovery timeline are definitely going to dominate his combine experience, unfortunately. He's not going to be doing any on-field work while he's here, as he's recovering from his surgery and has not yet been cleared. Now, this dude's 6'2", 220, and apparently has a 4.40 time. He's got all the physical traits. The problem is it's not going to be probably, realistically, until 2027 season that we really see him on full display. But that being the case, man, he could be a steal because his stock is probably going to drop. This could be a guy that if you're willing to take that leap and pick him up in a later round, he might be a valuable asset in another year or so. And to be honest, that's when he's going to be really at his peak from his ACL recovery. So somebody might be willing to take a shot.
This is definitely going to be one of the big sleepers of the wide receiver group because Chris Bell is somebody that we were going to talk about potentially, I think, in the first round. I don't know, Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think he was definitely in that conversation. Like when you got into the earlier into the that next year. I mean, we see NFL teams love the combination of size and athleticism that he has, and it's not just the athletic profile that he has, but it's also like he's outright performing on the field and separating well, and I think moves pretty well for his size. So someone who had a lot going for him to be the leader in that next year. Without, injury, of course.
Yeah, I mean, Bryant laid it out for you. I mean, he's got the size you want. Before the injury, it's reported that he had the speed that you want. He also has the man coverage rate that you want at an 87.2. This is a guy who's had over 400 routes and 60-plus targets. He's a guy who projects as somebody who could easily be a 5 to 7 target type of monster, especially as a Z receiver heading into the next level. And I could see him starting at that position. Like, he doesn't need to be an X. He's not necessarily a deep field threat all the time, but he's not a guy who lived off of bubble screens either. He could dominate the intermediate part of the field as a route runner and with his body type. So somebody we were super excited Adam, I mean, give me some feedback on this, but I'm looking at the fact that he has his injury. To Brian's point, may not be able to perform for you until 2027, because even if he's physically healthy, cleared, let's say by next November, he's a rookie wide receiver who didn't really get to practice all that much. So his impact is going to be limited, if at all, in 2026, which is what Brian there is alluding to. So with that in mind, I have him potentially as a guy that people in dynasty rookie drafts may forget about and may not go to like the third round of rookie drafts. What do you think that's going to be like?
Yeah, I could definitely see that, if not sliding a little bit further. And he's someone who, a really good example of knowing your league settings, right? Because he is so much more valuable if you have a taxi spot than if you don't. If you have a taxi spot, I think he is a great option to just put there. You don't have to worry about it. Even if he comes off IR in November, for example, no stress. He's not wasting a roster spot for you. You come back that next season, you put him on your regular roster, and I think you've got someone who has a really good shot to outperform that draft capital for you.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that as well. It's somebody I'm going to be targeting around that area, especially if he winds up being like, let's say, an early day 3 NFL pick, which I think has a real opportunity to be the case, since there are so many wide receivers that NFL teams are going to be excited about heading into this draft that are healthy right now. So all that kind of plays into it a little bit. So keep your eye on Chris Bell. Yes, there's risk with a rookie wide receiver who doesn't get to play his rookie season. Does the team really remember him or give him another shot to become the start of the following season? But that is baked in if his draft capital in the NFL is day 3, and in rookie drafts, we're talking about round 3, round 4. All right, so before we totally wrap up the show, Brian, I want some more experiences. What's going on in the combine? Who have you talked to so far?
Oh, the best is yet to come, but I had a little conversation with Chris Sims from NBC Sports, former quarterback, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Just picked his brain a little bit about how much he uses injury history as his assessment tool when figuring out draft stock for guys. And then touch base a little bit on his injury. He had a spleen rupture when he was playing, which led to emergency surgery. That was a scary situation for him. We touched base on that a little bit. And then I've got a couple interviews coming up tomorrow. I'm going to be talking to Jermod McCoy, from the cornerback from Tennessee. I'll be doing a couple of other interviews throughout the weekend here. I'll be here till Friday afternoon, so we got more stuff to come. I'll be posting stuff on social media, though, so check it out.
So make sure you're following him at Injured List Podcast, because that's going to be flying like fire all throughout the week as we are all glued to the scouting combine, which has become just as big of an event as the NFL draft itself.
I'll tell you what, man, it's a lot of fun. It's been awesome. Everyone's really cool. It's pretty laid back compared to most events. Everyone's really open and willing to talk to you, and it's been a great experience thus far.
Yeah, and maybe 1 year I'll actually make it out there. That is my hope. But for now, Brian, just keep me updated. I'm so happy that you're out there. You deserve this. And I'll be looking forward to seeing your social media points. Make sure you check them out again on the Injured List Podcast. Check us out on Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app, and our video content on the Fantasy Football Advice Network at FF Advice Net. Guess what? It'll be more combine talk next week, because it's going to be winners and losers. We'll finally have the answers to all of our questions as far as the athletic ability of who tested and who did it. And so we'll have that for you guys next Thursday coming out. So be tuned to then. And until then, everyone be good and enjoy the combine experience.